With thousands of hours in every Souls game, and in the Souls series in general, somehow, Dark Souls 2 is the only game that I've barely ever touched. I've played Dark Souls 2 for 20 hours total, out of the thousands that I have in every other game. And I attribute a lot of that to how much I adore every other Soulsborne game, but just could not wrap my head around the differences that Dark Souls 2 had. And I think a lot of people in the community kind of share that sentiment about Dark Souls 2. It's a very polarizing game. You either hate it or you love it. And I have to admit, I was a part of the ones that hated it. But I thought, I've really only played the game once. I never gave it a true chance to shine. I never gave it time to realize itself the same way that I spent hours letting my first Souls game realize itself. And I thought that wasn't fair. So I wanted to come back and play Dark Souls 2 from start to finish for the second time ever. And reevaluate how I feel about the game. Unfortunately, I did already record the first part of this series. I had some issues setting up my recording settings. I've had a PC reset recently, and setting everything else back up was terrible. But we will start again, in an attempt to see just what makes Dark Souls 2 different.
Perhaps you've seen it, maybe in a dream, a murky, forgotten land. A place where souls may mend your ailing mind. You will lose everything. Once branded, the symbol of the curse, an augur of darkness. Your past, your future, your very light. None will have meaning, and you won't even care. By then, you'll be something other than human. A thing that feeds on souls, a hollow. Long ago, in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drangleic. Perhaps you're familiar. No, how could you be? But one day, you will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why. into a flame. Your wings will burn in anguish. Time after time. For that is your fate. The fate of the cursed.
I will immediately say that as cool as the intro cutscenes are for Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, I really like just how ominous this intro is, comparatively. You know, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 does a really good job of showing you, like, these are these powerful beings, these lords that you need to slay. But Dark Souls 2 feels like its own kind of encapsulated story, separate from all of that. And this idea of starting the game before you've even created your character, it's already one of the most striking differences between this game and every other one. One of the biggest things that I had mentioned was that Dark Souls 2 feels very aware of itself. Like, they don't really hesitate to mention the idea of hollowing, of soul acquisition, and losing those souls all the time. And you'll see I have very little time to speak between the intro cutscene and the next. But it almost feels like the ladies up here are mocking the player more so than the character itself.
What seems to be the ruckus?
Oh my, your face. The face of the curse. It's an undead. An undead has come to play. They all end up here. All the ones like you. You spoke to that kind old dear, didn't you?
You're finished. You'll go hollow. Yes, you'll become one of them.
Hollows prey upon men, feast upon their souls. This is the fate of the cursed.
What is your name?
So those remarks were obviously more aimed at our character, but definitely in the second half, when they begin to talk about souls, it really feels...
At least you know your own name.
really feels more directed at me,
Here's your
not really our character.
for sharing. It's a human effigy.
Take a closer look.
Who do you think it's supposed to be? Think back, deep into your past. Yes, it's an effigy of you.
As far as what build I want to go, I think the thing I really want to do is be a strength build. That's something I do in most games. I used to, you know, the very first time I played a Souls game was in Dark Souls 3, and the first time I beat Dark Souls 3 was with a Dex build. I hadn't yet understood. There were so many things about Dark Souls that I didn't understand yet. And there was still a lot of learning to do. And as I became more comfortable with the games, I began to just realize like how much more rewarding it felt to play these slower strength builds. And since then, I've kind of just been like that, never gone back. Basic physique with nice brown hair.
All
Just like me.
people come here for the same reason. To break the curse.
You're no different, I should think. Doesn't stand a chance.
Well, you never know.
Go through the door and trot along to the kingdom. But remember, hold on to your souls. They're all that keep you from going hollow.
That's the next line.
Oh, I'll fool you no longer. You lose your souls. All of them. Over and over again.
I mean, it's strange to say, but I feel like this section was one of the first things that immediately turned me off to Dark Souls 2. Because while the other games were, just like all of them, intentionally difficult, Dark Souls 2 really opened up, trying to scream in your face that it was a hard game, that you're gonna die so much. But the other games didn't really do that to you. The other games were designed in a way that made you feel like you could overcome the challenge that was presented to you. So it just kind of feels strange to open Dark Souls 2 saying, yeah, you'll die so much, you will fail. And I guess some could interpret that more as a challenge in itself, you know? Something for the player to want to be like, oh yeah, I'll show you. But I don't necessarily think the game needed that. Because the other Soulsborne games, I mean, you feel that way naturally just by playing them. You didn't need to be told that you would fail. I was saying that Dark Souls 2 was very different in this regard. It opened differently, it feels different to play. Something naturally just about the way the character controls, about the way that combat feels. It feels so unique from every other Soulsborne game. But comparatively, or specifically, to Dark Souls 1 and 3, since those are the closest sister games, Dark Souls 2 just had so much different about it. To an extent where it was widely disliked. But I think Dark Souls 2 did a lot of things right. And I think many of the things that Dark Souls 2 did right were translated into Dark Souls 3, which made Dark Souls 3, in my opinion, the best Souls game. Taking everything that 1 and 2 did right and combining them together into the ultimate experience. But I will say that Majula is one of the things that Dark Souls 2 did perfectly. There's something so iconic about Majula, and specifically its theme, that plays while you walk around in the area. The area is beautiful. The world itself, in this Firelink Shrine copy, if you will, it's so much more bright. You feel like this is truly your safe haven, whereas in the other games, it was just something you learned.
Are you the next monarch? Or merely a pawn of fate? Bearer of the curse, I will remain by your side till this frail hope shatters. Take this with you. May it ease your journey. Go on and see the king. He who made Drangleic what it once was. He who peered at the essence of the soul. King Vendrick. Bearer of the curse, seek misery. For misery will lead you to greater, stronger souls. You will never meet the king with a soul so frail and pallid. Seek those whose names are unutterable, the four endowed with immense souls. Their souls will serve as beacons. Once you have found them, return here to me, so that hope will not fade away. Bearer of the curse, seek souls, larger, more powerful souls. Seek the king, that is the only way. Lest this land swallow you whole, as it has so many others.
I really like the Emerald Herald. I think she is one of the best firekeepers that the game has to offer, or the series has to offer. Obviously, Dark Souls 1 didn't really have much contenders. But, regardless of that, I think one of the first things I want to do is come down to Hyde's Tower of Flame. Now, something I did say in my first recording was that my knowledge of Dark Souls 2 is incredibly limited. I've only played it once, and I was largely unsuccessful throughout my entire playthrough. I ended up completing the game, never finding any more than one Estus shard. So I had 2 Estus flasks the entire game, with no upgrade to them whatsoever. I was relying entirely on life gems, which is something I think DS2 did okay. I think the life gem system is controversial for sure. There's lots of people that don't like it and lots of people that do. I think it's okay. I think in the context of Dark Souls 2 it works, but it wouldn't work in the other games. And the biggest reason for that is because of one of the mechanics that really turned me off from the game, which was adaptability. The idea that your immunity frames when you dodge are tied to a stat was one of the biggest scares for me. I personally could not handle that. I will just have to block there because I played that poorly. Played that poorly too. It's not the 3-hit I'm exactly looking for. There we go. We'll kill him for the 400. We'll probably just ignore the hammer guy. If possible. Ow. Because the main thing I'm looking for exists right here, I believe. Not the Lloyd's Talisman. I'm looking for a soul item. Soul of a Nameless Soldier. I believe that's the one. Yeah. That's all I really wanted from here. The Cling Ring would be nice to get, but I tried that in the first recording, and it didn't go well. But like I was saying, my knowledge of Dark Souls 2 is very limited. And unfortunately, for the duration of this episode at least, I'll know what I'm doing. Only because I've just done it. But when it comes to the rest of the game, following this first episode, it'll be back to being essentially blind, remembering only bits and pieces of some of the struggles I endured. And I'll try to keep this as pure to my initial recording as possible, because I would like to end up in the same place as where I ended in that. So one of the things that, I was talking about in that first recording was the mechanics that made Dark Souls 2 kind of a turn-off for me. One of them being how ADP is a thing. The agility stat increases your immunity frames. I believe that was the one Estus Shard flask that I found. Oh, little piggies. Don't they just follow you everywhere? I remember them being kind of a pain. Not worth killing. Agility being a stat that increased your immunity frames as it went up was strange. I didn't like the idea of having my rolls being tied more to a stat than, say, something like my equip load, like it is in the other games. And I know that the equip load does have a certain effect on the roll distance, but it doesn't feel as intuitive as it did in the other games, because the other games it just kind of made sense. But in this game, you could wear extremely heavy armor with 99 agility or 99 ADP and walk out as if you were just mid-rolling or light rolling even. Again, I'm not incredibly knowledgeable, but it was something that initially bothered me. Another thing being, the way that...
Is that a shard you found?
It is.
Here, let me see it, so that I may help you.
Of course.
To see light, to see hope.
Thank you.
However faint it might be.
When you do certain animations in the other games, like opening chests or interacting with doors, levers, switches, even walking through fog walls, you're not interrupted by enemy attacks. You gain these immunity frames. And these immunity frames were very, very helpful because they allowed things like runbacks to be pretty straightforward. You'd run to the fog gate, you'd touch it, and you'd be good. It didn't really matter who was around you or if you had enemies nearby, but in Dark Souls 2, you can be knocked out of all of those interactions, and that was one thing that I remember pissing me off a lot, honestly. I found myself just dying before I even got to a boss because I'd get stuck at a fog gate with 8 enemies chasing me, and it wasn't fun. But these initial things that I had that were issues with the game, or my initial issues with the game, I feel were only there because I didn't let Dark Souls 2 grow on me the same way I let my first Souls games grow on me. Because I remember I didn't have a great time playing Dark Souls 3 the first time either. Dark Souls 3 was my first game. It's my favorite game of all time. But it wasn't easy the first time I played it. I got my ass kicked constantly. It was far from easy. But I let it grow on me and I kept pushing. And I don't feel like I've given Dark Souls 2 that same justice. And because of that, it's what really inspired me to want to do this. Run through the game again, giving it a true chance to show me what it wanted to be. And hopefully by the end of this playthrough, I will have formulated a new opinion about the game, and just about maybe the Souls series in general. Maybe something hidden within Dark Souls 2 will give me new insight on the way I've been playing these games as a whole. And I mean, that's not necessarily like the most likely thing ever, but it's also not unlikely. I will say one thing I did notice immediately was that hits in this game are weirdly inconsistent. You can do a complete dodge roll and not get stunned out of it. But sometimes you'll just get stuck in place when attacked by something else, causing you to completely stagger, which forces you to take even more hits. I think that's another frustration I had at one point, was just how aggressive some of the enemies' attacks were. Not necessarily aggressive as in they attacked a lot, because Dark Souls 3 had that too, but aggressive in the manner that dodging them, or at least sidestepping them, felt difficult, because the game fundamentally works differently than the other games do, and if I go into Dark Souls 3 Dark Souls 2 expecting it to control and feel like 1 and 3 did, I will ultimately be disappointed. Oh. Alright, hold on. So things like that. Running by enemies is not a good idea in these games. Or in this game, I should say. Running by enemies is a great idea in the other ones. But specifically in this game, I've found that running by enemies will get you killed a lot. I have to be careful about the chip damage that my shield takes, because it is an 85% block shield and not 100%. Which can lend itself to some problems sometimes. may be beneficial to try to learn some shield timings, parries like that. I don't know if Dark Souls 2 has them any different than 1 did, but I know that 3 drastically changed the window. Something closer to Elden Ring's. That was poorly played on my part. But like I said, in this game we have the benefit of the broken straight sword at risk already, huh? Broken straight sword, broken. Wonder if I have a replacement. The broken thief sword. This will have to do. At least until I get my hands on a non-broken weapon. But my goal is to really try to enjoy this game as much as I possibly can. Because I feel like I neglected to enjoy it the first time I played it. Oops. Maybe I can force him to come down here. Maybe not, since he's programmed to sort of throw firebombs at me. Firebombs look so much bigger. I find that sort of humorous. Gotta be careful. Arrows also seem to curve a little bit, which is also strange. Whoops. Spam this one attack so I don't waste too much stamina doing the wrong thing. I think there's an item I could grab here. Was there not? I must have already grabbed it. Nope, it's right here. Like I said, I have some limited experience in Dark Souls 2. Mainly of the first area. Because I ended up making lots of new characters the first time I played. But all in all, it shouldn't matter too much. I wanted to parry there. I found maybe that's not a good idea. Always a 3-hit combo with these guys. Something not that difficult to remember. Now with access to a new bonfire and a nice little shopkeeper, we can get our hands on what we were really looking for. I believe we need to pop 2 of these. Because I'm looking for the club as my weapon of choice for now, and the key to the blacksmith's house. And just like always, shopkeepers are creepy. Because when are they not? I think it's likely I could get through here before he wakes up. Do a simple run through of the area that I've already been through, which was right through here. Like I said, I'm doing my best to do everything exactly how I did it in my first recording. albeit with slightly faster speed. Only because I've already done it all once. I'm definitely upset that the recording ended up being that way. And I still, right now, have the same complaint about these spear guys. Dark Souls 1 first area spear hollows were not a big deal at all. Dark Souls 2, however, well, that's new. That didn't happen at all. Dark Souls 2, however, they are relentless, it seems. Three-hit combo. Reply with my own. This section's a little scary, as you come up here to grab this item, and several hollows drop behind you. When I say several, I mean several. There we go. All dealt with. I think on a second attempt, I'm finding it not as difficult. And like I said, I really think that gives way to this idea that your initial enjoyment of Dark Souls 2 really comes with this, like, aging with time idea. Where the game kind of seems insufferable if you play it through the lens of the other Souls games, but if you play it as its own thing, suddenly it doesn't feel too bad. I think that's what a lot of people recognize, is that Dark Souls 2 isn't a bad game. But when you compare it to the other Souls games, it's just a little pale, is all. How masterful. Oh, I've been parried. We'll have to keep that in mind. I find it funny anytime we see that kind of red pulsing around the boss intros, because it reminds me a lot of Monster Hunter Rise's monster intros. You get this kind of same red effect. I wonder what the cinematic purpose of that is. Like, what is that meant to represent? Something that was brought up to me that long time ago when I first played the game is if this is the last giant, why are there other giants? I'm honestly never ready for that triple hit. Is Dark Souls 2 supposed to be a super sequel? Where all the giants are dead? Or are they just lying about this being the last one? I mean, think of Yorm. Yorm in Dark Souls 3, which I had assumed to be the end of the timeline for Souls. Just strange to me is all. But with the last giant taken down, we make our way back to Majula to hear that beautiful theme again. First thing we'll do is unlock the house for our little giant buddy. Not giant, sorry. Our little blacksmith buddy. Still thinking about the giant. Get the short bow that we'll probably never use, honestly.
Ah, yes, very good. Now I can get to work. But first, let me set up. Come again later.
Very well. And we'll speak to the Emerald Herald for one level up
Bearer of the curse,
to end off the episode.
seek souls. Lord, seek the king, lest this land swallow you whole.
Now, like I was saying, I'm kind of worried about ADP as a stat. But I will leave it for now as something that I'm not necessarily needing to level in the interest of just pumping strength. And honestly, after the last giant, I don't know where to go next. I got a soldier key, which I believe will help me open some of those locked doors that we found back in the... well, I forgot what it was called, but that area. That castle area. So I suppose next time we play, that's where we'll be headed. As far as my thoughts, especially the second time doing this episode, I recognize that this game needs time to grow on you. And I'm willing to give it that time now. It's been long enough that I've realized that this game does deserve a chance. It doesn't deserve to be needlessly hated on. And that if I'm going to have a dislike or a distaste for this game, it needs to be grounded in well-developed feelings. Not in a half-baked, rage-filled gaming session. And that's what I hope to achieve by the end of this. So, I hope you guys come to stick around. Hope you guys choose to watch more and explore more of this game in a new lens. But until then, thanks for stopping by.